Of COS Live. In a few moments, we are expecting the third and final round of debate by the Nebraska unicameral on our Article 5 legislation. That's right, you are about to see history, folks, because Nebraska is just one vote away from becoming the 17th state to join the Convention of States movement. That is so exciting. Can't wait to get to it. Let's review some background information on what you're about to watch, and also encourage you to stick around afterwards. After the live debate from Lincoln, Nebraska, we are also hoping to get some live reaction from Convention of States Senior Regional Director Dave Schneider. So 16 states have already passed the COS resolution, our Article 5 for a convention proposing amendments to the U.S. Constitution on 3 topics: fiscal restraints, term limits, and limits on federal scope and jurisdiction. We're using the Constitution to save the Constitution. That's an important thing to hit home. We are using this Constitution, what the founders gave us in Article 5, to save the Constitution, because we have runaway debt, we have a runaway Congress, and we have a federal government that has gone well beyond its jurisdiction. In addition to the 16 states that have already passed the COS resolution, there are an additional 20 states that are considering our resolution right now, and that includes Nebraska. So how did we get here right now? Live streaming at the Nebraska unicameral chamber. This all started with We the People. The Convention of States Nebraska volunteer team has been busy building support across the state in the state legislature. About 20,000 Nebraskans have signed the Convention of States petition asking their state legislators to vote yes on COS. A scientific survey shows that 66%, that's a huge number, 66% of Nebraskans favor the state calling for an Article 5 convention to propose constitutional amendments that limit the federal spending, limit federal power, and establish term limits for Congress and or federal judges. That's exactly what this Nebraska unicameral is about to consider in just a few moments. Republicans widely favor Nebraska calling for convention of states. 79%, that's a huge number of Republicans. 79% are in favor, as does a majority of Democrats, 53%. Again, this is a huge number, and it shows that we are a nonpartisan organization. Red, blue, doesn't matter. This is an American movement. This is a red, white, and blue movement to limit the federal government. If we have a successful vote today, Nebraska will be the 17th state to successfully join the Convention of States movement. Our resolution number is Nebraska is LR14. So a little bit more backstory before we get going. I still haven't gotten to the floor yet. For years, our Article 5 resolution has been stuck in the committee in Nebraska. In 2021, our legislative champion, Senator Steve Halloran, attempted a procedural move to pull our resolution out of committee. Unfortunately, that motion, it failed, and a local newspaper at the time said that we were dead in the water, that Convention of States is dead in Nebraska. But COS volunteers in Nebraska are not so easily deterred. They worked with the resolution's primary sponsor, Senator Halloran, as well as other legislators like Senator Mike Flood. In the final days of the 2021 legislative session, Senator Flood proposed a motion to place the Convention of States resolution back in its original committee. Senator Flood's motion passed by a vote of 30-14, reviving our Article 5 resolution. But the victories didn't stop there. Later that evening, a committee on government, veterans, and military affairs voted 5-3 to advance our resolution, our legislation, to the floor. This was a huge victory for us. And some of the legislators called it historic. The effectively meant that we would go straight to the floor for consideration once the 2022 legislative session started. So that's where we are right now. So all of that was last year, but there was still much work to be done. If you fast forward to January, after 3 hours of debate, which included an unfriendly amendment, the Nebraska unicameral voted 32-10 on the first reading to advance our resolution to the next stage. That was the first of 3 votes under Nebraska rules. The vote on the second reading was also successful with a vote 32-8. This was done despite the opposition planning a filibuster to block our resolution. The Nebraska team was able to get the necessary support to overcome any threat of a filibuster. This sets us up for the final vote today. The COS Nebraska team is hoping for a positive outcome. They have put in so much work. The grassroots are amazing, and they've just continued to work so diligently. And they've worked with their legislative champion, Senator Steve Halloran. Since Nebraska only has one legislative chamber, this means that our resolution only has to go through this process once. No governor's signature is needed either. So stay tuned for after the vote. We're going to have the regional director, Dave Schneider. He's on the ground there in Lincoln, Nebraska, and he's standing by to give us a live reaction to today's vote. Since we still have some time before the debate, a programming note for next week. For next week's COS Live, we are expecting to get reaction from the Wisconsin team because on Tuesday they became the 16th state to pass the COS resolution. They joined the Convention of States movement to limit the size, scope, and jurisdiction of the federal government. So we're going to have commentary from the Wisconsin team. We're going to be talking with them, celebrating with them. It's an amazing day. It was an amazing day for Convention of States. It's been an amazing week for Convention of States. We are so excited. And it looks like we are getting ready to go to the floor for debate. So we are going to transition over to the floor. Stay tuned. We'll have live reaction after with Regional Director Dave Schneider. He's going to give us live reaction after the floor debate and after Nebraska possibly becomes the 17th state to pass the COS resolution.
Mr. Clerk, please record.
I have a quorum present, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any corrections to the journal?
I have no corrections.
Thank you. Are there any messages, reports, or announcements?
There are, Mr. President. Health Committee reports Legislative Bill 1004 to general file. I have a series of agency reports received on the legislative website. They're there and available for member review. I also have the lobby report as required by state law. And an announcement, Mr. President, the Health Committee will have an executive session next Monday morning at 9:45, room 1510. Health Committee next Monday at 9:45 in room 1510. And finally, Mr. President, a new resolution, LR 289 by Senator Slama, that will be laid over at this time. That's all that I have.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Colleagues, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh would like to recognize Dr. Joe Miller of Omaha, who is serving as the family physician of the day today on behalf of the Nebraska Academy of Family Physicians. Dr. Miller, if you would please rise to be recognized by your Nebraska legislature. Speaker Hilders, you're recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I wanted to give you an end of the week update. I have two updates at the end, one about scheduling for next week, and then a second one about something going on in February. Before I do that, I wanted to just take a step back and talk a little bit about where we are in the schedule. I've made this a point every one of my end of week announcements, but there's been some conversation on the floor and even anecdotally in some of my off the mic conversations with some folks who have sort of talked about, hey, look, we're moving into big issues early, and almost suggesting maybe too fast to discuss these big policy issues. And I just want to take a step back and remind everyone of a few facts of where we are. Number one, where we are is we're already a quarter of the way through the session. We're on day 16. We're already a quarter of the way through. And in fact, when you take into account veto overrides, layover days at the end, we're almost, practically speaking, a third of the way through session. A third of the way through session. We have only moved 6 out of 106 2022 priority bills. So we're a third of the way through. We only have 6 of the 106 done. Between now and full day debate, we have 5 weeks of debate. Those are half-day debates. One bill, in any of those weeks, we have just under 14 hours of debate time on the floor. One bill that goes to cloture on each of the 3 rounds is over 14 hours. So in the next 5 weeks, if we have just 5 bills that happen to go to cloture on each of those rounds, that's all we can do. The time is limited. Coming out of into full day debate, we have one of the most complex budget scenarios that we've had maybe in modern memory. Not just a interim budget, we have an ARPA budget, we are dealing with cash reserve transfers. That's in mid-March, we think. That's going to be a couple weeks of time. On the back end of that, we only have 2 full weeks, we think, if all goes well, 2 full weeks to finish all the rest of the work that we have. So I just want to lay those facts on the table because we don't have time. We don't have time to stretch. We don't have time to sort of limber up. We have to get into big issues now. My priority is to get through all the 2022 priorities. I've said this consistently every week since we started. I think it's very unlikely that we won't get through them all, but we are going to do everything we can to try to do so. And that is why 22 priority bills that are identified by the prioritizing senator that are on general file or select file and are reported to the floor with a hand delivery to my office will get scheduled. And at least for the next 2 or 3 weeks, they will get scheduled right away. So my scheduling methodology that I've laid out from the beginning and I've repeated every week is those priority bills will come up. And I appreciate the senators who have already taken me up on that invitation to get their work done early. So those include a number of senators, but include Senator McKinney, Senator Coulterman, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, Senator Breezy, and others. So I know there are some issues that are going to take time with hearings, and we got to work through, and that's okay. I understand that. I'm not asking for all the priority bills to come out right now, but I want to make really clear, if we don't make good use of this time now, we are going to look back on day 55 and say, what were we doing? So keep the big picture in mind as we move forward. As we move forward into next week, here's what our schedule looks like. As of now, keeping in mind, of course, if another priority bill gets prioritized, reported to the floor, and hand delivered to my office, I will schedule that as soon as I possibly can. If we don't get it to today, Senator Coulterman, his priority bill, you saw that showed up on the agenda yesterday, LB 767, that's on my list. On Monday, we will have Senator Michaela Cavanaugh's priority bill on select file, that is LB 376. I also have received in my office, and has been voted out of committee, Senator Breezy's priority bill, LB 986. Once that's reported to the floor, that will go on the agenda for next week. So those are the ones that I have now. I will try to do final reading, generally speaking. We don't have much on final reading now, generally speaking, as we did it last year at the end of the week, as we have today. But over the next few weeks, with half-day debates, and depending on what you all bring me in terms of your priorities, that will be the biggest variables in influencing what we have on the floor, and we will continue to be nimble. The last announcement I have, many of you have seen these ties around. Individual senators have been wearing these. Are ties from the American Legion. There are also women's scarves from the American Legion. And Senator Clements and Senator Pansing Brooks and myself on the day after President's Day, of course we're not here on President's Day, the day after President's Day, which is February 22nd, we will be wearing these ties and scarves, and we would encourage you and invite you all to join us in doing so. Some of you have these ties, and some have the scarves. If you don't have one and you would like one, we are going to be bringing around an order form to individual senators today, and hopefully you can join us in a symbol of patriotism for our country on that day together as one body. With that, I hope everyone has a great weekend. I know this is our only 5-day week of the year, and I appreciate your work this week, and have a great weekend as we go into next week. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Clerk, we will now proceed to the first item on the agenda.
Mr. President, Legislative Resolution 14 is on final reading. I do have a motion. Senator McAllister would move to return the resolution for a specific amendment, that amendment being to strike the enacting clause.
Senator McAllister, you're welcome to open on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. This is one of those big issues, Convention of the States. I stand here this morning to voice my opposition to LR 14 as written. However, I would first like to applaud Senator Halloran for remaining steadfast in his commitment to LR 14's passage and acknowledge he does so out of great concern for the future of our beleaguered country. Thank you, Senator Halloran. In the debate on select file, I should acknowledge that I was pleased that this body voted to adopt Floor Amendment 63 and do feel this provision has improved the resolution. But the proposition is still too risky in my view. Mr. President, can I have a gavel?
Colleagues, could you please hold it down?
Though the language of LR14, the Nebraska version of the Convention of States, is limited to proposing constitutional alterations to just 3 amendments, they are fiscal constraints on the federal government, limit the power and the jurisdiction of the federal government, and to limit the terms of office for officials and members of Congress. I think these calls, as well as intentioned as they are, could result in a creation of a creature we cannot control. Rather, the concerns we all share, embodied in LR 14, should be conveyed to our congressional representatives in the nation's capital for diligent resolution.
Senator McAllister. Colleagues, let's please be respectful.
An early issue I have with this resolution is that none of the calls in the language adequately serve to protect the First Amendment, Second Amendment, and any language in the Constitution as it exists today. A convention of the states would allow alteration of these precious documents in such a convention of the states. This alone should disqualify the proposition from our consideration. When considering fiscal restraints on the federal government, the first impetus of the Nebraska call are the budget constraints that a convention of the states would impose. A better resolution is that Congress needs to regain its fiscal sanity. Budget controls have worked in the past and should be reinstated. A federal debt of trillions of dollars is certainly a frightening figure on its face, but we have heard many times throughout these rounds of debate that our children and grandchildren will be subjected to the crippling debt. But to resort to scare tactics in an effort to irresponsibly slash our national budget could truly imperil our country. Better yet, carefully decrease our deficits and bring these budgets into balance over a reasonable number of years. Limiting the power and the jurisdiction of the federal government, good luck with that. The Nebraska budget prior to the pandemic included 1/3 of its money from the federal government. This argument will be difficult to decouple, and I assume all states have a similar dependent financial relationship with the federal government. Too drastic a severance could result in a crisis. More measured, long-term division orchestrated by Congress would be in the best interest of the country. Lastly, our term limits of Congress representatives is difficult to argue against in this proposition. Citizens United, the Supreme Court ruling, increased the power of incumbency to the detriment of the country, so perhaps a constitutional amendment for this purpose should be considered. Many have argued against a convention of states because of the potential for a runaway convention. Could a state introduce an amendment for consideration of stripping all real power from the president? I think so. Some proponents have argued that a convention would allow for elimination of the Department of Education, Department of Energy, the federal income tax, and even the IRS. The mock convention of states from 2016 even gave Congress the ability to override any existing or proposed federal regulations, while also repealing the federal income tax and requiring a congressional supermajority to impose any new taxes. All these concerns that I have listed do not touch on the fact that no structure for convention has ever existed or been seriously considered to be made into law. Who may represent a state convention? Shall each representative from any one state have a final vote, or will each state have one vote? Will the public be able to view all the proceedings? Will the convention be allowed to ignore Nebraska's original 3 objectives outlined in LR 14 as the Convention of 1787 ignored its charge? Again, I find myself unable to support a constitutional convention of the states while basic procedural measures are unknown. The motivation for a convention is real and valid, but the Convention of States is the wrong vehicle. It's true that the federal government needs to have many of its operations closely evaluated for efficiency, effectiveness, and the ability to positively affect the lives of Americans. I am still, however, opposed to the call as outlined in LR 14 because there are simply too many questions outstanding for me to support it at this time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McCollister. Debate is now open on FA 67. Senator Hunt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I rise in support of Floor Amendment 67 and in opposition to LR 14, as I've stood in opposition all 4 years that I've been here. Or what, this is my third year? I don't know, whatever. Every single year that I've been here. What I've said, when I was first learning about the idea of the Convention of States, I don't think that it's inherently a scary idea. It's not that I'm scared of the idea, and it's not that those who are opposed to LR 14 are afraid of giving power to the people or afraid of trying something new. It's that when you really follow what would happen with a Convention of States to its logical conclusion, you see, okay, there's a lot of things that could happen that wouldn't really turn out the way we want. Every time we hear discussion about a Convention of States, a lot of the discussion is around fears of a runaway convention. And that's kind of where a lot of my opposition is coming from. And you know, people ask questions like, once you've sent your delegates, how do you keep them from rewriting the entire Constitution? But the idea that we could send our delegates to a convention with a limited scope and a limited purpose, it isn't really realistic. I also have a problem with the way LR 14 made it to final reading. Nebraskans, LR 14 is on final reading because of vote trading. Because Senator Halloran went around here for years and years trying to find a path for this resolution to be passed in Nebraska, and he exchanged a lot of votes for that. And this isn't something that fundamentally your representatives in the Nebraska legislature support, and it gives me a lot of concern that we are here representing the people of Nebraska and that we're possibly going to move forward a resolution that we don't really support and that could be really damaging to our nation. We advanced to final reading LR 14 with this amendment, this sort of compromise amendment to kind of void it after 5 years, saying if there's no Convention of States in 5 years, then LR 14's over, we're gonna have to like bring another bill and do it again. But colleagues, think about how we work in here. There's nothing preventing a future legislature from striking that, from bringing another Convention of States resolution or an amendment or something that gets rid of that 5-year clause. So I think that some of us in here are kind of sitting back thinking you've really done something, thinking, wow, we really found a compromise and everyone is happy, but they're gonna pull the rug out from under you and pick up the football, like in Charlie Brown, because there's no reason that next year they can't just take that 5-year thing out. And anyway, I actually kind of wonder if that 5-year clause that we put in LR 14 would even work. Because colleagues, think about you know, how a resolution would work if we were to go into special session. We'd have to have 33 of us who agree that there's an issue that we want to come into special session for. We all sign the letter saying that, we give it to the Secretary of State, we give it to the governor. And if something changes after we deliver that letter and we decide we don't want to go into special session anymore, we don't write another letter. You can't take it back because that's not the rules. That's not how it works. We would have to go into special session and then vote to adjourn and then be done. But
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'm not sure that that's not how it would work with a Convention of States resolution as well. It's not like we can resolve to go into Convention of States and then say, send another letter and say, oh, never mind. I have questions about if that's actually the way it would work. I don't really have a problem with the idea of a balanced budget amendment. I've heard lots and lots of arguments about why that's not a good idea. I don't know if I really have a problem with that. I don't know if I really have a problem with term limits. I mean, all of these ideas that people want to discuss with Convention of States, all of them are good things to discuss. They're the types of things that we discuss in the legislature all the time.
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Lathrop, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, good morning. I have been opposed to LR 14, and I have not spoken on the bill or the resolution, and I thought I would now that we are on final reading. Senator Halloran, I share your concern over the national debt. I am frightened by the national debt. I have conducted myself in a conservative, personally, and in my business, in a conservative way. It is frightening. And you know, I look at the resolution, and here is my concern about the resolution. It first talks about go there and do term limits. Let's get term limits. And then let's put some constraints on the budgeting process. And there's a third one. Here's my concern, that we're looking for a simple solution to a complex problem. And in my experience down here and being a political observer, complicated problems aren't solved with simple solutions. Having served with half of the body that was not yet term limited when I first arrived, I can tell you my judgment, my opinion is this body is not better off because of term limits. It's an easy answer for people when they are upset with how things are going. We just say, throw the bums out. I keep voting for my guy, but I don't like your guy. So we end up with term limits in Nebraska, and it's not been good for this institution in my experience. That's my own personal opinion. Secondly, with respect to the debt, it scares the daylights out of me. It scares, that amount of debt is frightening. And you know what? In the last two presidential elections, I don't even think I heard a question. In the election cycles that followed the Clinton administration, the last time we did balance a budget, they would ask presidential candidates, what do you want to do about the deficit? I promise I'll get it under control in 2 years or 3 years or whatever their promises. They don't even talk about it anymore. But what if we pass this, and what if they did that? Have you thought about it? I mean, will they go after farm programs first? How are they going to get to that place? What will they do to get to whatever it is you want them to do? See, my judgment is this, that the problem in this country is our division. It's our division. And are we contributing to that division, or are we trying to solve it? This doesn't solve it. It offers the people who are fiercely engaged in the very activities that create the division, we have the answer. It's simple. We'll get everybody together and have term limits. It won't fix it. You know, my former colleague, now U.S. Senator Deb Fischer, voted for the infrastructure bill. She was roundly criticized. Roundly criticized. And by the way, Senator Fischer was a steadfast advocate for infrastructure when she was here. Steadfast. Came up with a 1/4% of sales tax for roads because she believed that that was important. Then when she got to the United States Senate, she voted for the infrastructure bill. And you know why she was criticized? Not because we don't need infrastructure, but because she gave Joe Biden a win. This gives the illusion of doing something about a problem in this country. And we can, as elected officials, contribute to that division by feeding the people, the talking heads, and the pundits that have monetized all this division. The guy who has a radio station or a TV station, or I should say a network, and he's getting people mad all the time. You can't help the Democrats, so what are we going to do? If we're going to function as a republic, we got to work together. And the difficult problems that you want to address
Time,
with this,
Senator.
did you say time?
Time, Senator. Thank you, Senator Lathrop. Senator Erdman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning. I see the queue's got about 10 or 12 names in there, and I don't normally get involved in helping run a filibuster, but I will this morning. I was wondering if Senator McCullers would yield to some questions.
Senator McCollister, will you yield?
I wanted to say, I didn't want it to feel like
Senator McCollister, will you yield?
Does that count against my time?
I finally made it. Yes, I will yield.
Senator McCollister, in your rambling, I guess I'll call it that, anyway, your comments, you had mentioned that we may eliminate certain things, and could you enumerate those again? It was like the Education Committee, IRS. Could you go through that short explanation of what you said?
You want the list or an explanation?
Well, no, I just want the list. There was 3 or 4 that you listed that we could eliminate these things.
Well, I know some adherents had wanted to eliminate the Education Department, the Energy Department, the EPA, eliminate income taxes, and the IRS.
Okay. So out of those things that you just mentioned, the EPA, the IRS, and the Department of Education, I have no problem agreeing they should be eliminated. So to me, if that's what could happen in a constitutional convention, I'm all for that.
I understand.
Because that's all the questions I have for you. That is 3 of the agencies that need to be eliminated. So using that to try to explain to me why I should be against Convention of States doesn't work. I'm all for that. But what you need to understand, those things aren't on the schedule. They're not on the agenda. And so we're going to stand up here this morning and we're going to talk about filibustering, or we're going to filibuster the Convention of States. And I think that's a good idea because there's a lot of other bills coming up that I hate. I shouldn't say that word. I guess you're not supposed to use strong opinions. But I tell you what, I'm glad we're doing this morning because it prevents us from getting to other bills that I dislike. So whether we waste time on this bill or we waste time on the ones I don't like, it's all the same. It's still wasting time. And so everyone listening back home, you need to understand you're in a better position this morning because we are wasting time when we're not passing bills to spend more of your money or to place some restrictions on your freedoms. But the other issue that comes to mind is we are not fixing the problem with the vaccine mandates and the other rights that you've currently lost or they've been taken from you. And so we will filibuster this for 2 hours or whatever the limit is, and then we'll vote. And Senator Holleran had 32, 33, 35 votes last time. I would assume nothing has changed. And so we'll move forward and pass this, but we'll waste 3 or 4 hours or whatever it is. So when people suggest some of those things that we may eliminate, they're in my wheelhouse. I like it. The Department of Education needs to be eliminated. I would agree. EPA needs to go away. The IRS, that is an agency that needs to be eliminated for sure. So I'm all for those things being eliminated, but I am going to vote for LR 14. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator John Kavanaugh, you're recognized. The gallery will be quiet or you'll be escorted out. Thank you. Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I appreciate that we're back on this conversation, and I wanted to rise and kind of say where I'm at. So I previously on the 2 rounds of this, and I believe the last time we voted on this in 2021, I was present not voting on, I think, each of the iterations of this issue, and we've had some debate, and some of it's been more substantive than other parts, and I try always to have the conversation go towards where answering questions that I genuinely held questions about this issue. Over the course of this, I've had a lot of people contact me on both sides, my constituents being in favor of this and being opposed to it, and so I just wanted to rise, since we're debating this and we're on the final vote, to explain how I'm going to vote, or why I'm voting the way I'm going to vote, because I think there's a lot of people here who just clapped who I think deserve an explanation. People, my constituents, deserve an explanation for why I'm voting the way I'm voting. So I have previously voted present not voting, and it was, some people ask you, why do you vote present not voting? And it's, sometimes people don't want to take a position. I voted that way because I was genuinely saying to myself and to others that I was not a yes and I was not a no yet, but I was in between. And at this point today, I'm going to vote no because of, I think a lot of people have rightly articulated questions with this issue. I've heard from people, and people have legitimate concerns and beefs, arguments, complaints about how our government, federal government in particular, functions. There's a political climate that is detrimental to progress in this country, and so I understand, and people of both political stripes, Senator Halloran Senator Halloran, of course, but Senator Erdman has a lot of complaints about the federal government that are different than the complaints that I have, but that doesn't mean that they are no less valid about the fact that we have a government that doesn't work how we want it to. So I'm a no, not because I don't share your complaints and not because I don't think that we need to take approaches to fix it. I'm a no because amending the Constitution should be very difficult. That we have standards in place to make it difficult, and this is a difficult process. But when we talk about how it's going to work, the people advocating for the convention have answers, but they're based on how conventions went 250 years ago, which, again, that convention was a runaway convention and didn't stick with the call. But I don't think that we are sure how this is going to play out, whether it's going to be constrained. I also have my concerns about how it would play out if it adhered to the answers that we've been presented. One state, one vote, I don't think that's the way we should make these decisions anymore. I don't think, if we're going to amend the Constitution, that the state of Nebraska, though I represent people in the state of Nebraska, why should the 1.9 million people in the state of Nebraska get the same vote as the 50 million people of California? I know most people here are going to disagree with what the perspective of the people of California are going to bring to that conversation, but that is not democracy. That is not, we shouldn't be making these major law changes on that process. And I know that's the answer that we've gotten from people, is that it would be one state, one vote. I'm not convinced that that's how a convention of states would be structured either. I don't think we have any assurance that that's how it would be structured. And I think that it's important that we make sure we have a little bit more work, not by people here. Senator Halloran has done all the work that could possibly be done on this issue in the state of Nebraska, and I commend him for that work, and I commend him for the conversations he's had with me about these issues. But it needs more work at the national level. We need to have some certainty attached to this at the national level about how these sorts of things are going to work if we are going to have a convention of states. So we aren't flying in blind like this. And so we can actually know whether we can have a constrained call or not. So I'm going to be a no today. I'm not going to try and spend a whole lot of time talking about this. I think plenty of people have their opinions, but I appreciate everybody contacting me. I appreciate everybody's enthusiasm about this, but at this point, I can't vote for this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator DeBoer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to say thank you again to Senator Halloran for working with my objections on this LR last time when we voted through the amendment to put in a 5-year rescission. And I'm going to vote for the bill, the LR, As a result, that takes away my concern that we just have something sitting out there for 30 or 40 years. It's a very different world in 30 or 40 years. You never know what's going on. I've heard some interesting points today. I want to address the issue of the Runaway Convention. The biggest fear people have about the Runaway Convention is that technically it's possible, true, can't deny that. But the other one is, well, it's happened before. It happened with the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation were a few years old when that happened. We live in a very different world right now. Our Constitution is precious to a lot of us in a way that the Articles of Confederation just hadn't had time to sink in. I just don't think we're living in the same circumstances. The Articles of Confederation, when they met to discuss amending the Articles of Confederation, they all had to drive on their horses and wagons to get there and sit in an unair-conditioned room and try and figure it out. We just don't live in the same world. Now, I know that technically it's possible there could be a runaway convention, and that is something that gives me pause, I admit, but I think within the constraints of a very constrained call and with the cameras on them in ways that didn't happen the last time, I think the people will care about their Constitution and won't want to completely overturn it. I agree there are no simple solutions in here. There are no simple solutions in here, that's really true. But this isn't about a solution, this is about a conversation to see if we can get to a solution. And I don't think we help our division when we won't have a conversation. Now, maybe the solution is we have this conversation first and then we come together later with the Convention of States, but this has already started. I just don't see what the danger is of having the conversation. I too share the concern about the national debt. This is something that, keeps all of us up at night. If we're going to have a conversation, a serious conversation about it, and by the way, if we're talking about a simple solution, do you think getting all of the delegates together to come up with a solution, it's not going to be easier for them than it is for Congress or us or anyone else? That's going to be a very difficult process. They'll have cameras on them too. I don't think they come to a solution quickly. I don't think they come to a solution lightly. If they do, then trying to get the rest of us to agree to it is a problem. This is a country where we govern by the consent of the governed. And in order to get the consent of the governed, we have to have something which has broad appeal. If it doesn't have broad appeal, I'm just not worried it's going to get passed, it's going to get agreed to, this is not something where I think it's just going to get swiped in underneath us. And for the point about the 5-year rescission could get taken away, sure, but that would take the same thing as passing a new bill. There would literally be no difference in the vote count between passing a new bill and passing an amendment to get rid of the 5-year rescission. So I have confidence that this body in 5 years will either take up a new bill or take up the rescission amendment to take it off. Either way, it's the same function. They would need 33 votes if there's a filibuster. But in 5 years, they can have that conversation.
One minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Right now, I think we should pass this bill, or LR, and open up the conversation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator DeBoer. Senator Holleran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Well, we are back to the fear of the unknown. Senator McAllister, would you yield to a question, please?
Senator McAllister, will you yield?
Certainly will.
Thank you, Senator McAllister. You have expressed a lot of anxiety and concern about how a convention of states would be conducted and how we would conduct ourselves or our delegates might conduct themselves at a convention. Is that right?
That's correct.
You're on Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee with me.
I am indeed.
There's a bill I have in front of that committee, LB 195, Faithful Delegate Bill. Did you vote that out of committee so we could discuss those issues?
I think that bill is from last year. Is that correct, Senator Holleran?
It's still in committee.
Yeah. I don't think it's come up for an exec session yet.
Would you vote that out of committee?
I need to review the bill before I
Oh, we
make a
hear this
commitment.
all the time. I need to review the bill. You know the bill full well. It's a bill that states and specifies from this body how delegates would perform at a convention of states, what they would be allowed to do and not to do. It would give clarity to this body, and this body would participate in designing that bill to make sure that delegates don't go beyond the call of the convention. You understand that. I know you do. You're a smart man. Would you vote that out of committee?
Well, Senator Halloran, I think the faithful delegate provision you speak of hasn't been tested. I'm not sure whether it would indeed
Thank you,
make
Senator.
that delegate.
Thank you, Senator McAllister. You know, when the founding fathers designed this bill, they had great anxiety. They had great anxiety about the potential for a runaway, centralized federal government. They designed that federal government, but they had anxiety that someday it may be go beyond its reach and beyond its call. It's not a question, Senator. I'm not asking you a question. But that was their anxiety, and that's why they designed Article 5. The very first draft of Article 5 at the convention, the very first draft was specifically allowed for only the states to call for a convention of states to propose amendments. They changed that in the final reading. They changed that and added Congress when 2/3 of Congress. So they had two options. Let me ask you a question I asked previously on this floor of another senator. Can you show me in the Constitution, Senator McAllister, can you show me in the Constitution where either Congress or a convention of states has a constitutional authority to amend the Constitution?
Well, I can't point to a specific clause in the Constitution, but I do know Convention of States is in the Constitution. However,
Senator McAllister,
it's a vacuous comment, and
It's
really,
not, it's not, thank you, Senator McAllister. It's not a vacuous comment. Article 5 is very clear. We often have an aptitude at times to make very simple language, such as Article 5. I put this on everyone's, had the pages put this on everyone's desk. Article 5 is very simple language. And it very specifically says there's two steps, Senator McAllister. Two steps in amending the Constitution. One is where Congress, 2/3 of Congress, or states call for a convention of states for what purpose? What purpose? Proposing amendments to the Constitution. That's not amending the Constitution, Senator McAllister. The second step is a very fundamental and important one, and that is ratifying. Ratification is what puts it in the Constitution or does not put it in the Constitution. Who has that right, Senator McAllister, to ratify? Would you yield to that question, Senator McAllister?
Senator, can you repeat the question?
Who
Senator
has
McAllister,
the
will you
authority?
yield?
1 minute. Time?
Yes, 1 minute. Senator McAllister, will you yield?
Yes.
Who has the authority in the Constitution, as specified in the Constitution? What body has the authority to ratify an amendment, proposed amendment, put it in the Constitution?
Well, the states, of course.
The states. That was the founding fathers were very, very specific, used the word equal many, many times in the drafting of the Constitution, and they used equal in this sense too. They said the states should have equal footing with Congress in proposing amendments. That's all they can do is propose. And then the states have the authority to ratify before it becomes an amendment. There's a lot of fuss going on around here about what might happen if this happens or that happens. Fact of the matter is, proposing is something we do here in this body all the time.
Time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Holler and Senator McAllister. Senator Blood, you're recognized. Senator Blood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. We were confused which one you wanted. Fellow senators, friends all, I'm not sure I stand up in favor of Senator McAllister's motion, nor on the underlying bill, and I haven't really spoken a lot on this bill, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why. I know people have talked about runaway conventions and what's the real purpose of this, and why do we need this to happen? And I've heard a lot of really good things on the floor today on both sides, Senator Halloran. And I hate to say sides from all of our peers. I think that's a better way to put it. But for me, the issue that I've had from the very, very beginning, and I have this issue with a lot of bills, not just this bill, and I bring bills forward about this same issue, is who's behind and where does the money come from? So I look at names like Mark Meckler, Michael Ferris, Tom Coburn, Jim DeMint, and I start following the money. Who is funding this? How are people making money? And are they getting wealthy off of this? And I would say in at least 2 of those cases, those individuals are getting very wealthy, which that's the American way, and I don't fault them for it. And I know, friends in the balcony, that we have a diseased, recycled government. And I don't disagree with that. And I think there's some middle ground when it comes to term limits. Should we have term limits or no term limits? We should definitely have term limits, but it should be in a way that it doesn't give the power to special interest groups and lobbyists like what we have going on in Nebraska right now. And what I saw when I looked at some of the money path, and agree with the issue or not, again, this is the funding that I've been seeing since this issue started, is that you see money being laundered through C3 organizations to push for this state legislation. And I'm not sure that I'm okay with that. And it doesn't mean that what you have to say isn't valid. What it says to me, though, is something that I have always been concerned about, and that is dark money in politics. And that is something that the folks that come to my office and talk to me about this issue keep saying that that's a problem, that we don't want big money in government, especially at the federal level. But yet we have it at both the state and federal level, and it seems to be that big money is okay, especially when it's dark money, as long as we get our way. And again, I'm not sure I'm okay with that. I have a dark money bill. The same people that are pushing for this bill refuse to kick out my dark money bill from committee. You know why? Because there's a lot of people that may not be in this body today if that money hadn't come in to save their campaigns at the last minute. And I wonder if you're okay with that as long as you get your way. And so I'm obviously thinking out loud, but I looked back historically through some of the meetings that they've had trying to bring people into the Convention of States. And we know that Wolfpack has been in here, and American Promise has been in here, and they wanted Convention of States because they wanted to overturn Citizens United. And the reason they wanted to overturn Citizens United is for the same reason that I'm kind of talking about today, that they wanted to make sure that there was not unlimited corporate spending on elections. But they were shunned from some of those meetings because it didn't match the mission of the other groups, and it was thought to be too liberal. And for me, I thought Convention of States was not to be about party, but the people and policy. But that's not historically what I'm seeing. And that makes me uncomfortable.
1 minute.
Mark Meckler, who again has made millions off of this, declared that when it came to that corporate spending and overturning Citizens United, that it was one of the greatest free speech decisions in American history. So saying that, and then pushing for Convention of States because there's too much big money in government, to me is hypocritical. And so, to be really frank, friends, I agree. Disease recycled governance, something has to be done. But when you follow the path, when you follow the money, it makes me uncomfortable as to who's behind it and what their true intentions are. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator Groney, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have supported Senator Halloran's LR 14, and I plan to do it in the future. Did your heart stop there a little bit, Senator Halloran? But anyway, I actually think it's a futile effort. As I've said before, if we've got judges now and legislators who don't support the Constitution of the United States, even this legislature took away people's rights on their to be represented in court, the free decision to do that, and said they have to. What would a Convention of States do us any good if we don't have judges who follow the Constitution now and legislators. So anyway, I've got a real curious question for Senator McCollister. We seen on the floor yesterday about questioning Senator Flood about his change of a vote. And I've been questioned by the public about my change on medical marijuana, medical cannabis, and I've explained it, and Senator Flood explained his. Senator, I got a question for Senator McCollister. He's very vehement about being against this, but he was the deciding 30th vote to have a rules suspension to bring this bill back, which was already dead. Senator McCollister, can you explain to the, would you take a question and explain to the body why you brought back from death with your deciding vote on the rules suspension on LR 14 to bring us to this position now?
Senator McCollister, will you yield?
I will yield. Everybody makes mistakes, Senator.
That was a pretty serious mistake, as vehement you are against this. So I guess, gosh, I'm glad in 7 years I've never traded a vote. I'm going to leave here with my integrity. But it is what it is. Those who do, got to live with it. And then they fight. I guess it's a pretty good fight to change that mistake. But I stand, as I said, I do appreciate the 5-year sunset on it. And we don't need, if there's a crisis in America and the proponents of the Constitution of the States or Convention of the States, they can't get it done in 5 years, I guess it's not that critical to have it done. So thank you, and I stand in support of LR 14 for closure.
Thank you, Senator Groney. Senator Pansing Brooks wishes to announce the following guests visiting the legislature. We have 22 students, 2 teachers, and 1 sponsor from the 5th and 8th grade from Blessed Sacrament School here in Lincoln. They are seated in the south balcony. Would you please rise to be recognized by your Nebraska State Legislature? Thank you for coming today. Returning to the queue, Senator Pansing Brooks, you're recognized. Senator Pansing Brooks waves. Senator Flood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, it's unfortunate that we're in a filibuster on final reading here, but nevertheless, I want to thank Senator Halloran. And I want to tell you a story about Senator Halloran. He has taken this cause under his wing, and he has gone about the state. I hadn't been in the legislature very long, and he told me that week that he was going to be meeting with some of my constituents at the Norfolk Public Library. And I walked into a room that was packed to the brim with over 300 people that were well educated about what he was talking about, and Senator Halloran in that room on that day with my constituents, he reinforced in me why this is important. And when we looked, him and I together, when we looked out onto that crowd of people, many of whom are here today, I saw the extreme fear about where our country's going, about the overreach of the federal government, about their dissatisfaction with Congress, about the overreach of the regulations that are made by bureaucrats in Washington and not lawmakers elected by the people. And I asked myself, what else besides this could we do to change the course of this country? And the answer is, this is the process that's outlined in our Constitution. What Senator Halloran is doing, he is following the rules. He has put together a strategy together with other states to do exactly what the framers of the Constitution intended. And when the people are acting, America is working. When the laws are construed for the help of those that make them, for the benefit of those who make them, it isn't as our framers intended. What Senator Halloran is doing with this resolution, and by the way, this thing doesn't go down the hall at the end of this debate, it goes straight to Washington. There are very few legislative vehicles that leave the hand of the Speaker or the President of the Legislature signed by the clerk and go straight to the United States Congress. And what we're doing today is we're raising our hand as a state and we're saying we want change. And you have to trust the people. A lot of people in here have expressed concerns that this will happen at the convention or that will happen at the convention. There are a lot of patriots in America, and they're not all in one party. They're not all in one state. They're not all in one city. They are all across this land. And if we want to make the systemic change that we're talking about today, this is the process. We're not doing anything dangerous. We're following our own rules. We're following our own Constitution. And there's a lot of people in that balcony today, and there's a lot of people in my legislative district that really want the Constitution followed, and when they see a problem, they want to do something to fix it. The people that sit up in that balcony today, they have 1,000 things they could be doing. There's somebody up in that balcony last week that had took off a shift at the Pizza Ranch in Norfolk because he wanted to be here. People have given up their day to come down here and watch us and ultimately hold us accountable for making the changes that they feel need to be made to move America forward. My neighbors are up there. Your constituents are up there. They have a lot better places to be, but they're here today because they know what we're doing and they know how absolutely important it is. And I want to stress something. What Senator Halloran is doing here is absolutely the process.
1 minute.
It's in the Constitution. It's the way that states can express themselves. It's the way that the people can express themselves. And at the end of the day, by voting yes for this, I am expressing the frustration of thousands, literally thousands of Nebraskans that want to see something changed. So enough of the fear-mongering, enough of the doomsday scenario. There is an amendment on here that eliminates this in 5 years. We are going a place where our founders intended, and we're doing it the way that they intended. So I'm going to vote yes on LR 14. I'm going to vote no on Senator McCollister's motion. I'm going to vote no on returning to select file if we get there. And I look forward to this getting sent to Washington by the 1st of next week. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Flood. Senator McCollister, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Flood and the rest of our colleagues, I think we all want change. What I'm simply saying is the Article 5 Convention of the States is the wrong vehicle. I've been studying this issue for at least 5 years. Many people have talked to me about the issue. I know it's important to them, but I came up with 9 reasons not to support a convention of the states. Let me give you those 9 reasons. States can't limit the scope of the convention. Secondly, dysfunctional Congress decides the convention rules. Third, convention could change ratification rules or suspend the rules. We know about suspending the rules. We've done that on occasion in this body. Nebraska has proposed 3 amendments. The so-called Freedom Group has proposed 10. Governor Abbott in Texas has proposed 9. How do we winnow down all of these resolutions that the various states are presenting? The call by the states does not appear to be uniform. That's a problem, I think. Next, once delegates are selected, states apparently have no control over the delegates or the process itself. No set method for delegate selection is established. Dysfunctional Congress is to determine that. Number 8, delegate selection proportional to the state population or equal for each state in the U.S. Senate. 1 person, 1 vote, is that fair representation? Lastly, can Congress overturn the convention's proposed amendments? The Runaway Convention argument is based on the idea that Article 5 Convention of States, for the purpose of proposing amendments, cannot be limited. That is, an argument based on how 2/3 of the Congress of proposing requirements for a controlled is far more controlled by comparison, making the argument this traditional mode much safer. This is a false premise. Actually, it also shows little regard for the law, political reality, history, legal precedent, and the Constitution itself. There are numerous redundant examples of legal protections against ultra-virus amendment. Go beyond the legal authority being proposed by Convention of States. The COS mode of proposing amendments is actually far more controlled and limited than the traditional 2/3 of the Congress, and no way authorize a new constitutional convention. However, I think that's a false statement. I think there's, in answer to a question Senator Holleran presented to me, there's precious little specificity in the Article 5 call. It's interpreted by Congress, and we have no idea what will ultimately result in that proposition. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McCollister. Senator Hunt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we're here on final reading with a bill that the majority of us don't support. It is bad government, it's bad policy to pass a bill that we know is harmful with a limit on it when that limit, that 5-year limit, could be changed at any time. We shouldn't even open that door. People might say, well, it's true of any bill that we can change it in the future, but the difference here is that we don't usually intentionally pass a policy that there isn't really support for and that we know is bad and just put a limit on it to appease people. Other bills that we pass can be changed in the future. Yes, every bill we pass can be changed in the future. But I think we all agree that we should be passing policies that there's actually a majority agreement supporting it, and that a substantial portion of the body thinks it's a good idea. To me, this 5-year clause saying if there's no Convention of States and there's no Founding Fathers role play ceremony and we don't, do this big conventional reenactment for fun, if the country doesn't decide to do that, then in 5 years this goes away. But this bill, this resolution, doesn't have support of the body, and we're only pretending it does because of compromises and vote trading. And that's bad government to suddenly lend our support to something that has an arbitrary and easily removable limit. And trust me, if you're looking for reform, if you want to change the system, I am not the one. I'm not the one to say that I'm holding that up. I agree that Congress is broken. I agree that the system is messed up. But this idea is wild. And given the current political climate that we have in our country, highly racialized, voting rights under attack, half the country thinks the president wasn't elected. That's wild. On the brink of authoritarianism, something like this in these modern times is literally not going to go well for the American people. I don't support a Convention of States because it opens the door for other special interest groups to fund this thing and have a direct line to making wholesale changes to the US Constitution. Even the most limited Convention of States that does stay neatly within its boundaries, which the only argument that I've heard from Senator Halloran and other supporters of Convention of States about why you're going to stay within the bounds of the call is trust us. Just trust us. Just believe us. We're not going to do anything bad. Why on earth would anybody trust that? Look at the way the country is right now. Even the most limited Convention of States that stays within its proposed boundaries could devastate Nebraska's state budget It could weaken crucial federal protections of voting rights by changing federal law to the will of a small percentage of the population. I support changing leadership, changing policies, changing culture through access to the ballot. And as we see in state by state by state, the erosion of that access to the ballot.
1 minute.
Voting, shortening the number of days for early voting, getting rid of polling places, making it harder for elderly and disabled people to vote, all of these different things. That's what all of you folks should be angry about. What you should be angry about is the inability of regular citizens to cast their vote because of the erosion of voting rights, not saying, oh, we don't like the way things are going, so why don't we just rewrite the Constitution? That is fantastic. It's a fantasy. We have a good democracy if we can keep it, if we can protect it, and the basis of that is voting rights. And that's the thing that we should really be protecting. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Vargas, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to weigh in here, and largely for two reasons. One, I haven't really weighed in on this, and I wanted to be able to explain my vote and myself. First is, I do want to thank Senator Halloran and also Senator DeBoer. One of the reasons why I moved this along was largely because there was some amendment and there was some movement in that direction. I'd really never had supported this in the past. Senator Halloran knows that. I don't take lightly amending our Constitution, and I don't think anybody takes it lightly. I think there's different interpretations of the urgency around that, and I think that's the debate that's being had here. And I do appreciate Senator Halloran for that. And I guess to Senator Flood's point, look, we're having the conversation. It is important, but it's still whether or not we are convincing enough individuals in the body that this is enough for us to open up. Because I don't think it should be taken lightly personally. I'm concerned that the calls for our convention to amend, look, it should be difficult to do this. It should take time and resources. It shouldn't be an easy process because the conventions could put, it's not a doomsday, it's a could. It could put a lot of our cherished freedoms like rights and protections in jeopardy. It could not. The point is that there isn't the guidance to then allow or dictate or make sure that there are those things that are put in place. But I think it is a part of sort of the perspective and the ideology on whether or not you believe that that is okay or whether or not you want to not open that up. Because there is no guidance about the convention, and that's a concern for me. It's a concern for how we should approach this. And like many others have stated, I do have concerns about the balanced budget requirements, the debt ceiling limits, and other financial restrictions that could limit our country's ability to respond to national security concerns. I think it should concern all of us. It's just whether or not we believe this is the mechanism. I'm concerned about the political polarization that is coming through politics right now, and that leading to how this can be a really disastrous conflict. I wish there was more civility and then that we can rely on that being the case for us to have the conversation, but less of that is happening. It's for that I'm not in support of this right now. Not because it's not a good idea, we haven't debated it, but I've heard a lot more information even since the last round of debate. And I do commend Senator Halloran for his work on this because he might have convinced enough people to be on board with him, and he might still in the end. And that is the process of this. I've been here before, even with my meatpacking plant bill. I had a certain number of votes heading into one round, and then I didn't the next round. And this could still go through, but at the end of the day, I just wanted to make it clear for myself that it's not the Chicken Little whether or not the sky is going to fall. It's when there's a lack of there's lack of the process in there. It worries me because there are many things that currently exist in the Constitution that we all hold sacred, and the ones that I'm looking at that I'm most concerned about making sure protect, those are the ones I'm most worried about. So I appreciate the debate. I just wanted to make sure that that's clear, and I do appreciate Senator Halloran for doing this. There will be a no vote on this, but on the bill itself, moving it to beyond final reading into law. But thank you very much, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Senator Vargas. Senator Brandt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Halloran, for bringing LR 14. Through all the debate, this is the first and only time I'm going to speak on this. I serve on the Judiciary Committee, and if you serve on the Judiciary Committee, a lot of the arguments that get brought before you are about the Constitution. We hear a lot of debate about our First Amendment rights or Second Amendment rights. It just sort of depends which legislation is in front of us. And as such, I'm a believer that the Constitution that we have is a very good document. I believe that the way to fix some of the problems being addressed in LR 14 is simply to elect people that will get the job done. And that just doesn't seem to be working. We don't elect new representatives. We don't elect new senators. We don't elect new congressmen. And it's taken me 4 years to get to this point. 4 years ago, the national deficit was about $24 trillion. Today, it is pushing $30 trillion. I have had hundreds of frustrated Nebraskans contact me on the need to do something. And I believe this can be the way forward. I support LR 14. I do not support the other two amendments. And I would give the rest of my time to Senator Halloran if he would like that.
Senator Halloran, 3 minutes, 33 seconds.
Thank you, Senator Brown. I appreciate that. So there's been some comments here I would like to refute just a little bit. Senator Blood expressed some concern about people making money off of this, right? All you taxpayers up here, I'm sure you're all concerned about someone spending their volunteer time. They may get paid for it. Mr. Meckler's being reimbursed for his expenses. But he's devoted to the concept that Article 5 is important. It's part of the Constitution. Part of the Constitution we all swore to uphold. Our state constitution and our federal constitution. When we made that oath, we didn't say, well, we uphold the U.S. Constitution except for these words in Article 5, which are dangerous because, as Senator Megan Hunt said, this is wild. These founding fathers were just wild, crazy guys, right? They had this concept that states should be on equal footing with Congress. Folks, what this gets down to, this is an issue of a question of states versus state sovereignty and power, as detailed in the 10th Amendment, and the federal government's power, which is detailed in the 10th Amendment. Equal footing, that's what the founding fathers had concern about. But back to Senator Blood's concern about dark money. She never expressed any concern about Common Cause Nebraska, which is an affiliate of Common Cause National, which is funded by George Soros, partially funded by George Soros, but that's okay. George Soros can influence you all, some of you folks that are opposed to the Constitution or Article 5, and give you notes about how to oppose it. But I think these fine people in the balcony and the fine people watching on the network would have a little bit of concern about George Soros having any impact on this. Senator Megan Hunt is on Government, Military, Veterans Affairs, as well as Senator Blood and Senator McAllister. And I'm anticipating that they will vote LB 195, a faithful delegate, out, so that we can debate it here on the floor. Senator Megan Hunt, would you rise to a question, please?
1 minute. Senator Hunt, would you yield?
Yes.
Senator Megan Hunt, we share positions on that committee, Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs. LB 195 has not made it out of committee. Would you vote that to the floor so we can put some definition to what delegates can and cannot do and should and shouldn't do, and penalties accordingly?
Senator Steve Halloran, can you remind me what that bill is? What's that one?
It's a faithful delegate amendment which details, through by description of this.
No. I'm not going to support that because there's nothing in Article 5 that says a faithful delegate amendment can put any bounds on what
there you
can
have.
happen
Thank you,
in the
Senator.
Constitution of
Thank you,
states.
Senator Hunt.
You're welcome, Senator Steve Halloran.
What she's saying is that she'd stand up here and complain that there's no detail on how a convention of states will be run and what delegates can and can't do, and yet she doesn't want to bring to the floor a bill that would define that by this body. Sorry, you can't have the argument both ways.
Senator Halloran, that's time on what you were yielded, but you're on your own time. You're next in the queue. You may
I'm
continue.
on my own time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, as though it's not colorful enough the way it is, let me add a little additional color to this question. I've said several times that this is a question about state sovereignty versus federal authority. We're coming up on an election this next fall, general election. A lot of serious issues, a lot of candidacies will be dealt with in that election. And I think it's important to make note, Senator Flood made a very positive comment in support of LR 14, call for an Article 5 Convention of States, saying that it's the process. And it is the process clearly defined in the Constitution. I think it's important for the voters to recognize there are three people in this body running for Congress. Senator Flood has made a statement that he supports state sovereignty, that he supports equal footing on the part of the states with Congress to propose amendments. But I find it interesting, the other two candidates that are running for Congress are voting against this. They're making a public statement that they think Congress should be the exclusive authority to propose amendments to the Constitution. That's important to take note, voters. They want to go to Congress, and they aren't going to propose any of these proposed amendments. They aren't going to go there and propose limiting their terms of office. They aren't going to go there and propose limiting, having fiscal restraint placed upon Congress. They aren't, and they can stand up and correct me on this, I hope they do, they're not going to go up there and limit some of the regulatory authority and grant it back to the states. Elections have consequences. Senator McCollister says, well, we need to let that process work, and we can fix all of our problems in Congress if we just elect the right people. Well, pay attention, voters, I know you are, because two candidates for Congress here don't seem to be very supportive of the states having this right to do it as laid out in Article 5 of the Convention of States. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thanks, Senator Halloran. Senator Blood, you're recognized.
Fellow senators, friends all, I continue to not stand in support of Senator McCollister's motion and still indifferent to LR 14. And since Senator Hollister wanted to bring me into the conversation, I just want to make it really clear. You said he was devoted, Mr. Meckler was devoted to the cause and giving volunteer time. Mr. Meckler has made millions off of this. So good on him for volunteering and becoming a millionaire. To me, that's a red flag. So fair enough, we both have our opinions, and I respect yours. And as far as common cause, again, I brought my dark money bill because I am sick and tired of dark money filtering into our elections, filtering into our causes. So be it Common Cause Nebraska or be it whomever, it's all wrong, Senator Halloran. So to try and pick something, because I don't know if you're trying to infer that perhaps I support causes that aren't as conservative as yours, is just shenanigans. That's all it is. It's really not anything concrete. So here's the one thing that I remembered, and I had to go back through my notes from years ago, but there's a radio called Red Eye Radio. Are you familiar with that? Red Eye Radio is traditionally a conservative radio station, or radio program, I should say. And Mr. Meckler, who we were talking about as a volunteer, was asked if there was a bulletproof, really good way to stop the same process from cycling over and over again after we get new amendments at a convention. And his statement, his verified statement was, and I'm going to give you the short and blunt answer, which is no. Now, I know that Mr. Meckler is not the people in the balcony and is not the Convention of States. But as you said, he is the well-paid volunteer that is walking around and promoting this and pushing this. And he does that because it does help him with all of his sub-companies that he has. He gets speaker fees, and he writes books. And good on him for finding his lane and for making money from it. But then again, I follow the money. I follow the money, and whether it would be convention of states or certain people's elections in here, and I'm not going to start pointing out who the candidates are because I think that that's wrong when we campaign on the floor. Well, that's just me. I look at how the money is filtered, and I see all of these donations that have been filtered through Vanguard Charitable Endowment Programming. And I know the response is going to be, but here's what the, somebody tell me rich people's names from Nebraska, I'm drawing a blank. Hollins, the Holland family does, and they give to organizations that we don't agree with because we think they're liberal. So it's okay that dark money filters through this organization because you guys are doing it on this side. This us versus them narrative and never seeking truth and fixing the true underlying issues in our campaigns will mean that no matter what we do, we are never going to see what we truly want to see, which is truth in our elected officials, which are people like me, like you, that know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck, have to deal with when we run for office, that we're not older, wealthy people. We're people who have to have jobs in order to be a state senator because we only get paid $12,000 a year. But when we compete in a campaign, we don't have the benefit of this dark money in the last 30 days because we have to show where our money comes from. I just want to put in perspective that it isn't the cause and your concerns that are falling on deaf ears. The concern is where does the money come from and what's the real motive behind it? And I'm not sure that it's your motive. I think there's some big money motive that you're not hearing about because you're being given smoke and mirrors. And that is my concern. My concern is not you, what your beliefs are not valid and your concerns are not valid. My belief is there is too much big money at every level of government, and they do a great job of hiding it, and they do a great job of having people stand on this floor to say, oh, but look over here. The other party's doing it too. Well, it's both wrong. It's all
It's time,
wrong.
Senator. Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator Lowe, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Senator Vargas and I must have been thinking along the same lines because I got back down here and he happened to mention it. And so we're going to get to the meat of the problem. So sit back, I'm going to read a story. There once was a big farm near a vast field, and here there lived a hen named Penny. She was great friends with everyone, and those who knew her gave her many names. She was also known by Chicken Little and Henny Penny. One morning, Henny Penny was plucking worms in the hen yard. An acorn dropped from a tree onto her head. She had no idea what had hit her, however, and so she started shouting, "The sky is falling, the sky is falling." She ran around in circles for a while and calmed herself, and then got right to waddling. She had to alert the king. She waddled and waddled and waddled until she found her excellent friend, Rooster Booster. "What's the matter, Henny Penny?" he asked. "Oh, Rooster Booster, the sky is falling, and we must alert the king," she cried. "Oh, we must, he cried back. Henny Penny and Rooster Booster waddled and waddled and waddled until they saw their wonderful pal, Ducky Chucky. "Henny Penny, Rooster Booster, hello, fine day, isn't it?" Ducky Chucky giggled with a splash to the water. "Oh, Ducky Chucky, the sky is falling, and we must alert the king," Henny Penny exclaimed. "Oh, we must, Rooster Booster chimed in. He looked at the concern on his friends' faces, nevertheless, and shrugged his wonders away. Henny Penny, Rooster Booster, and Ducky Chucky waddled and waddled until they met up with Brawny, Goosey Brucey, falling with ease at the other end of the pond. "Oh, Goosey Brucey," Henny Penny began, the sky is falling, and we must alert the king." "Oh, we must, Rooster Booster chimed in. Ducky Chucky looked back up at the blazing sun and again wondered, how the sky could fall on a warm summer's day such as this. Goosey Brucey wanted to protect his fowl friends, and he wanted to join them on their journey to a nearby place, but he had questions about the sky above. Henny Penny, he started. How do you know the sky is falling? Well, it fell right on my head, she answered. Goosey Brucey puffed his chest feathers instantly and moved right along. Shrugging, his question went away. They also met up with Turkey Perky, and the same thing went on. Henny Penny, Rooster Booster, Ducky Chucky, Goosey Brucey, and Turkey Perky waddled and waddled and waddled until they could see the place just beyond the farmer's field. As they waddled over the hill of the vast field, they saw a flash of reddish brown before them. It was Mr. Fox. None of the fowl friends had ever met this sly creature before, but they had heard rumors of his trickery and appetite. Henny Penny, Rooster Booster were obviously, though they desperate to keep moving. Ducky Chucky suddenly shivered, forgetting the day's heat, while Goosey Brucey's chest became even puffier. Turkey Perky just stopped and smiled.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll cut this short. Rooster Booster and Mr. Fox came out of a hole. While they were distracted by the quacking and splashing, Goosey Brucey looked at Turkey Perky, who gave him the signal, and they stood right under the tree over the hole. The goose puffed his chest as hard as he could muster and bumped the trunk of the tree, causing the tree to shake. Several acorns fell, covering the hole and hitting Mr. Fox, knocking him out cold. And Henny Penny figured out what it was. It was not the sky, but just an acorn. And they all went back to their pens. The moral of the story, the sky is falling, is a groundless or absurd conviction that some catastrophic consequence or imminent danger is underway. There is no imminent danger. This is just LR 14. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. Senator Lathrop, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, excuse me, I wasn't quite prepared for this, or I wasn't at my usual place when my name was called. I want to pick up on a point I was making previously on the mic, which was the idea that LR 14 offers a simple solution to a complex problem. And I want you to imagine that this actually passes, and enough states do it, and the Constitutional Convention is called. So we're an nearly equally divided country right now. How is that going to work? Is that going to be any different than the legislative process that's going on in Congress right now? So I watch, as an outsider, these campaigns. I watch, as an outsider, as a citizen, what goes on in Washington. And every time one side says, we're going to do this, they run across Washington, D.C. to a different press conference, and they go, oh my God, if you do that, it's the end of the world. They're trying to take everything away from working people. And then the other side will say, we're going to do something for working people. You're going to ruin the economy. This won't end the division. The division will play out in this process. At the end of the day, we need to get our country back to a place where the division isn't such an important part of the political process. It isn't central to the political process. Right now, we have a good portion of the country watching one 24-hour cable news station or listening to a particular AM radio station. And we have another half of the country or another portion of the country watching their preferred 24-hour cable station or listening to their talk radio that it reinforces what they believe, and none of it's balanced. And it's worse than that. We're making enemies out of the other side. I have plenty of friends who are not in my political party. A lot of friends that are not in my political party. And I have conversations about politics with many of them, at least for a while, until they get mad. I mean, I can see it. They get angry. I'm like, wait a minute, you're a friend of mine. We're not going to get angry about this. We don't need to get angry about this. We can have a conversation about it. But now we have elected people and people running for office feeding that anger. And they're raising money off of the anger. So we now have, and this is my gripe, we now have places that hold themselves out as a news outlet offering commentary. And it's one thing to say, you know, the rollout of Obama's website for health care was not well done. That's probably a fair criticism. I'd probably agree with you. But now it's, this person's dumb, this person's wrong, these people are the enemy. That's why we can't figure out what to do with our budget. We label everybody, those tax-raising Democrats or those spending Democrats or those conservatives that cut the taxes to the point where we can't balance a budget. We're making enemies out of other Americans, and we're talking past each other. That's the problem, and this isn't the fix. This isn't the fix. Stop looking at these crazy websites that are telling you and feeding you misinformation. How much time do I have?
4 seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lathrop. Senator McCollister, you recognize. This is your third opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. President. A lot of the discussion this morning has been based on faithful delegates. Senator Halloran has a bill before the Government Committee, LB 191, that talks about faithful delegates. But in that analysis he made, we may have a faithful delegate provision in Nebraska law. What about the other states? They may not have that same kind of provision. A gentleman that we all know, former Senator Paul Shoemaker, says Congress does the call after the 23 states ask for it, and arguably sets the rules and selects the delegates and apportions the delegates. For certain, state legislature cannot constrain the voice of a delegate. So I just don't think, even if LB 191 were to pass, we really could constrain the delegates that would show up. So I think that's one issue that we haven't dealt with specifically. And we talk about Congress administering the Convention of the States. Why do we believe that Congress, a dysfunctional Congress, can do any better with Convention of the States as they have with so many other issues that they're now facing? As I also argued, that we have a lack of specificity with an Article 5 convention. The Constitution provides that 2/3 of the state can call for a convention to amend the Constitution, but it provides virtually no other guidance, a lack of specificity. It is naive to believe that Congress won't play an impactful role in shaping the convention. There's nothing stopping Congress from controlling the date, time, location, delegate process, and other convention operations. The Constitution also doesn't say how a convention would make decisions, and a convention could either establish a new way for the nation to ratify those decisions, such as a national referendum. Who knows? With so much at stake, corporations, wealthy individuals, and other well-heeled special interests would be expected to spend huge amounts of money to influence the choosing of delegates and the delegates themselves once the convention starts. Just not enough detail for us to move forward with this proposition. It's a fearful thing. We create this creature, there's no idea what this creature could do. Mr. President, I yield the balance of my time to Senator Hunt.
Senator Hunt, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Senator McAllister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is wild, and I didn't say that the Founding Fathers were wild and crazy guys. I'm saying this is playtime for people who want to be Founding Fathers. We are not Founding Fathers. We are petty fools in here who are term limited, and a lot of you are here because the billionaire in the northeast corner who acts like a king. And people who stormed the Capitol on January 6th are not Founding Fathers or patriots. The people who showed up here last February for the gun bill hearings with their white supremacist gear on and their automatic rifles, they aren't Founding Fathers or patriots. Patriotism is exercising the right to use your voice, the right to vote. It's not overturning everything you disagree with violence. And I would also note just how out of touch this debate is.
1 minute.
Hospitals are at capacity. COVID testing sites are taking hours for folks to be able to get tests. Schools are closing due to staffing shortages. I had a meeting with my school district a couple weeks ago, and the superintendent told me, we're not taking the problem seriously. These kids aren't going to have teachers. We can't get people to work in healthcare. They're leaving because they're burned out because of the behavior emblemized by a lot of people here in this body who are supposed to be leaders of the people of Nebraska. Businesses in Nebraska, restaurants, venues, are desperate for efforts to support workforce development and fill great jobs. And yet here we are, playing government with our three-corner hats, acting like we're going to make a new little constitution and have some fun, like a Civil War reenactment or something.
Senator, that's time, but you're next in the queue, so you may continue. This is your third opportunity.
Thank you. And I understand that what I'm saying is offensive to some people who are here, but it's not offensive, it's stupid. I can't hear him. One thing about the 5-year clause on LR 14, when does the 5 years start and stop exactly? Could the next legislature change the LR in any way in the next 5 years? And where in this process, where in Article 5 does it give us the authority to put a sunset on a resolution for a convention of states? You have to ask, does the sunset expire immediately, or is it self-executing? Would there need to be affirmative action or a future legislature to repeal it, or does it just automatically go away? We don't know. We don't know. For the folks who are strict textualists of the Constitution, there's no mention of time limits in the Constitution, and there's no mention of how we can keep the call for the Convention of States narrow. There's nothing in there about a faithful delegate clause or anything like that. So no, I'm not supporting a bill for a faithful delegate this and that to come out of government committee, because then we're in the same exact place that we're in with LR 14. Which is calling for a convention of states that has no parameters on it during one of the most divided political times in our country's history, when I feel like, 25–30% of the country, depending on what polls you look at, are ready for a violent civil war. What on earth are we debating this for? When people can't get tested for COVID in this pandemic, some of you aren't even vaccinated, don't wear masks, think that's more unhealthy than getting this deadly disease. And I'm on here, I'm a single mom, my kid's at school, I gotta be here in Lincoln talking about Founding Fathers reenactment playtime? This is not what the people of Nebraska are concerned about right now. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt and Senator McCollister. Senator Wayne, you're recognized.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not going to talk about this bill. What I'm going to talk about is the governor has confirmed that he is not going to apply for the $120 million that taxpayers from Nebraska have already paid into the federal government for an emergency renter assistance fund. Let me remind everybody, we've already paid our taxes in. So if we don't apply for it and it's just sitting there waiting for us, the federal government is going to distribute it to other states. So our tax money will go to California to help their renters and landlords. And what's so ironic about this is in the governor's budget, he put $10 million for rental assistance for commercial property. So it's okay to use federal dollars for commercial businesses to make sure their renters can get paid or their landlords can get paid, but the people of Nebraska cannot get those same services. Again, we are putting profits over people. And you may ask why that's interesting or why I'm concerned about that. There are actual census tracts in my district, Senator Vargas's district, and Senator McKinney's district that have higher unemployment rates today than we did in the 2000-2008 recession. They have higher unemployment rates. And here's kind of why. If you get COVID, sometimes you can't go to work unless you're a teacher in Omaha Public Schools. And when you sit for 2 or 3 weeks not being able to get a paycheck, you have nowhere to go, then you may lose your job because you're trying to figure out what to do next. And even if you don't lose your job, you went 3 weeks, 2 weeks without pay, you can't pay your rent. When you can't pay your rent, you get a fee on top of that. And it just becomes this snowball effect to where you can't catch up. Every other state in the country has applied except for us. Now, I know we're unique with the unicameral. I know we do a lot of unique things. But this is money that Nebraskans have already paid into the federal government. And we're just choosing to not apply. It's irresponsible. Let me repeat, it's irresponsible. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Pansy Brooks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to talk about a couple things. First off, Senator Halloran misspoke when he talked about what my position will be and what I'm doing and how I'm planning to move forward. Yes, there are 3 of us that are running for Congress. That has nothing to do with what's going on here right now. But I'll tell you, I would be in favor of this if we had limitations on it. I would be in favor. I do want to do something about this federal budget. The federal budget is out of control. I have appreciated the fact that Senator Halloran has submitted those numbers to us every year until even through all sorts of administrations, and I really appreciate that, his bringing that, and it's been his passion, and it's been a really important thing to make us all aware of what is going on. But to say that I'm not going to be in favor of or that others here aren't in favor of lowering that budget or trying to look at whether or not we can amend to have a balanced budget like Nebraska does. I want things like that, the Nebraska way to go to Washington. I want our nonpartisanship in this body to go to Washington, and I'll fight for it. I've just been labeled as being against term limits. Term limits all depend on whether or not, how long they are, and for what cause. Right now, we have term limits in this body, and there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not the amount of time is appropriate and how we should do it. That's an important, huge discussion. But to be told that I am totally against term limits, yes, I do think that the primary way to get term limits is to vote people in and out. But I will acknowledge that Senator Halloran is correct, that we have had trouble voting people in and out of office, and that people, once they're in office, seem to remain. But again, I don't expect people to place in my mouth or on my little voting device. I don't expect for people to tell me how I will or won't vote when you have no idea. I'm going to vote for Nebraskans. If Nebraskans want term limits, and enough let me know in the district or in my legislative race and in my legislative district, then I vote according to that. And I'll tell you that I am not getting an overwhelming number of people writing, and now I may get a lot from today from up above, but I'm not getting a lot of constituents writing saying we want this convention of states. I've been watching it. I want to know. I want to listen. So again, colleagues, let's not place words or votes or expectations or presumptions in other people's mouths. I won't do that to the rest of you, and I don't expect it to happen to me. If we have rules, if we have a path, a plan, I want to see it. If we have a body that can oversee the fairness of the convention, that can determine whether or not people are being improperly discriminated against, or if we can see that the budget is truly going to be affected positively, that'll be great. I want to see that. I think it's important that the numbers on the federal budget are horrifying. So Senator Halloran, thank you for bringing this bill year after year. But also we need more ideas, and just because California isn't doing it one way, are we going to follow what California does? Is this by 2 votes per state, or is it by representation, at which point the larger states take over? What is it? There's no rule. There's no determination about how this will go forward. I can't vote on something I don't understand what you want to get out of it. A balanced budget is one thing.
Senator.
Representation of people is another.
That's time, Senator. Thank you, Senator Pansing Brooks. Senator Flood, you're recognized.
Is that Senator Flood or Senator Blood?
Senator Flood.
Okay. I have to check these days. There's about 5 false alarms a day. Good morning, members, Mr. President. We're nearing a vote on this here in a little bit. And I want to hit a point that I think is about integrity in our process, in American government, in Nebraska government. When you have a constitution that provides a process, when you have a state statute that provides a process, people that get up and go to work every day rely on what's in front of them. They want to know what the rules are. They want to know how to change things within the rules. And one of the great things I think that I've seen since returning to the legislature is that there are a lot more constituents of mine that have involved themselves in the political process, and they start by reading the United States Constitution. What happens when people read the Constitution, they see that there's a process to change something, they feel very strongly that something needs to be changed, and then they come down to their state government, they're following the process, and we tell them, no, this is too dangerous, you can't do that. What message does that send to people that work every day, that pay their taxes, pay their mortgage, put their kids through school, do everything they can to do things right, live under our laws, obey the laws, and then we tell them when they come down here, no, we know better than you. We can't do that. We shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do something that is explicitly outlined in the Constitution. Now, there's some of you that disagree with that, and you've voiced that concern today. But there's some of you in this body that have basically ridiculed people that want this to happen. You fed into their very suspicions about how politics works, how government works, how the legislature works, by ridiculing and diminishing what they believe is important. If you want to stand up on the floor and say, I respectfully disagree with calling an Article 5 convention for these reasons, that's part of the process. But to make fun of them, to rub it in their face, to use language that's incendiary, why? What are you accomplishing? You're actually destroying the trust that we want people to have with their government. I think people in the balcony today and the people watching that are in favor of this, they could take no for an answer. That's part of the process. That's why this is hard to change the Constitution. Nothing we're doing here is like a rocket sled on rails. Think about this for a second. 34 states, if I'm correct, have to pass these resolutions, send them to Congress. Then there's the convention process. Oh, and by the way, on the back end, 34 states have to ratify. How many? 28. 38, I'm sorry. 38 states have to ratify. That is not very easy in a divided America, but it's the process. And although you may disagree with people that want that changed, what's your answer? What's your plan? How are you, if you say, hey, I agree with their frustration, then put forward a proposal to change it. And the reality is, they're proposing to do it through the channels that are provided, and it's the only option that I see to accomplish the goals that they want to achieve, that we all want to achieve. And so, at the end of the day, somebody has to recognize that you may be on the other side of this, but let's not minimize their position, because we're not minimizing yours. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Flood. Senator Halloran, you are recognized. This is your third opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I did hand out a page that demonstrates that Mr. Hamilton narrowly defined and described the role of Congress in this process of a convention of states. There's been a lot has been said here. I think Senator McCollister has alluded that once a convention's called, the states lose any control over it, and it all goes to Congress. I don't know if you had a chance to read this. It's a quote from Hamilton. But narrowly down at the bottom, he says, nothing in this particular is left to the discretion of that body, meaning Congress. And of consequence, all the declamation about the disinclination to change vanishes in air. The language Mr. Hamilton uses in this passage could not be clearer regarding the validity of an Article 5 convention and the inability of Congress to prevent such a convention once it has been called by 2/3 of the states. Congress's role is basically a mailbox to gather and aggregate these calls, various calls for a convention of states. Someone has to be an authority, a trusted authority, to be able to count those and to be able to say, okay, the number has been hit, 34 for this particular call for a convention of states. Well, that's their primary role. Now, they can initially suggest a place and a time, but again, their role is just as a suggestion to do that. The states will have complete control over when and where a convention of states will be held. And I might add, once a convention of states is called, every state in the union will be vying to have that historic convention of states in their state. And it would be historic. It'd be watched, C-SPAN will be there. This will not be cloaked behind closed doors. This will be very open and transparent, as it should be. I'm not going to continue to spend the time adding to the filibuster of my own resolution. But I thank those that have supported this through general and select, and I encourage you to continue that in final reading. This is our Constitution at work. It is a process, as Senator Flood said, and it's one that the Founding Fathers laid out in front of us as an opportunity for states to have equal footing with Congress. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Halloran. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. I rise in opposition to LR 14. I actually don't know what is in the floor amendment, but I can't imagine that anything at this point would bring me along. And I am going to yield the remainder of my time to Senator McAllister.
Senator McAllister, 4 minutes 38.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon again, colleagues. I need to begin, since this is probably my closing, I need to salute Senator Halloran for his efforts on this. I think we can all agree that the country's in a hell of a mess. What I would argue is the Convention of the States is the improper vehicle to make those changes that need to occur. There are a few issues with this call that I think we've talked about this morning that you need to hear again. Lack of specificity. The Convention of the States is just a brief mention in the Constitution. And so I think we're really doing a risky thing if we were to issue this call and pass this bill. I stated there's 9 issues that I found with the Convention of the States. First, the states can't limit the scope of the convention. Secondly, dysfunctional Congress decides convention rules. Nothing we've heard today indicates that that's not correct. Convention could change ratification rules or suspend the rules. Nebraska proposed 3 amendments. The Freedom Group proposed 10. Governor Abbott from Texas proposed 9. The call of the states does not appear to be uniform. That's an issue we haven't heard much about today. Once the delegates are selected, states apparently have no control over the delegates or the process itself. And it's just a crazy proposition. There's no set method for delegate selection established. Dysfunctional Congress is going to do that. And we've seen how effective Congress is in the last 3 or 4 decades, and it's not very successful. Delegate selection proportional to the state population or equal for each state, like the U.S. Senate. 1 person, 1 vote. How do we take care of that issue? And finally, can Congress overturn the convention's proposed amendments? Perhaps so. As I said earlier in my opening, we're creating a creature we can't control. We're creating a creature we can't control. So I would ask you to vote down this proposition and move forward from there. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McAllister and Senator Cavanaugh. Senator John Cavanaugh, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I've already said my piece on this, but Senator Wayne brought up the issue, and so I looked it up. The Nebraska Examiner has the story about the governor refusing to take rental assistance, and Senator Wayne correctly pointed out that the governor is asking for money for commercial properties. This is $120 million for rental assistance for people outside of Douglas and Lancaster County. And so this is money, again, I've said it many times, help people stay in their houses, keep the lights on, keep the heat on, those sorts of things, in everybody else except for the Douglas and Lancaster County senators' districts. That is Sarpy County, that is Washington County, that is Lincoln County. So all of these other counties are losing out on money that will help people stay in their houses, keep the lights on, keep the heat on, because the governor says that we need to be responsible. I'm sorry, that's Senator Wayne, but the governor says the federal government has said that you no longer need any impact of COVID to qualify for funding, and that was specifically allocated to address the impact of COVID. So, I mean, I hope we take that into consideration when we're considering other appropriations as well. We should not be using taxpayer money to pay people's rent without a good reason. I would argue that helping people stay in their houses and keep the lights on, keep the heat on, and across all of Nebraska is a good reason, but I guess the governor doesn't agree that keeping people in their houses is a good reason. It's irresponsible spending like this that has ushered in a record inflation and surging national debt. In this case, Nebraska has elected not to take part. As Senator Wayne said, only state not to elect to take part. This money, $120 million, is going to go back to the federal government, and they're going to spread it out across other states because we refuse to take care of the people when we have the opportunity to help the people in Nebraska outside of Douglas and Lancaster County. And so in this article by the Nebraska Examiner, they interviewed an individual in Sarpy County who, can't find the quote here, but they said that they could use the help. The apartment association could use the help in Sarpy County. They could use it other places. And this is money that doesn't go to the tenant, it goes directly to the landlord. I have volunteered in the Douglas County Tenant Court in the last several months, and I've helped facilitate people get these applications in Douglas County and to process them. And what happens is you get together with the landlord, they agree to take the money, they set a specific dollar amount that they need that then goes to, in Douglas County, it's the match that helps people facilitate this. They get that information, they process the application with that information, and they cut a check to the landlord. So it doesn't go to the tenant, it doesn't go anywhere else, it goes right into the hands of business owners to get their money back. Previously, the way this was working in landlord-tenant court was they would go to evict somebody, and then they'd have to come with a separate action for to collect the past due. And landlords will tell you, they've come and testified on some of my bills, how hard it is for them to collect this money. What this does, helps people stay in their houses, helps landlords, property owners, keep pay their taxes, pay their bills, collect their money that they are owed in an easy, efficient fashion, and it comes from the federal government. And so to turn this down and to say that we don't have a good reason to help people stay in their houses is ridiculous. To say that we don't take $120 million of federal money for people in Nebraska outside of Douglas and Lancaster County, that is ridiculous. So we should be taking this money. We should be ensuring that we take all of the federal money that's available to us. This is relevant to this conversation because we're talking about our relationship to the federal government. And I probably am running out of time, but I like to be a person who admits their mistakes or corrections. Senator Flood today is speaking in a very, I think, constructive fashion. And he's right. People deserve and can handle being told I disagree with them. And I told Senator Halloran, and I've told the people here, and I told my constituents, I'm going to be a no on this. I'm just not there and being a yes. I disagree with how this is going to be administered and how it's going to be enacted, and some of the outcomes I think I would disagree with. So that's why I'm a no. I continue to be a no. I thank you for your time, and I would encourage everybody to read that article from the Nebraska Examiner. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thanks, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Day, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, colleagues. This is the first time that I've stood up and talked on this issue on the mic on all three rounds, I think including even the poll motion that originated this coming out of committee, partially because I don't have a lot to say. I have a lot of constituents who support this. I have a lot of constituents who do not support this. And so I've sat and listened to debate and tried to be thoughtful about the decisions that I have made. But I will say that my main concern from the beginning, and my main concern with a lot of pieces of legislation and resolutions that we have here in this body, that I think we all know that sometimes bills and resolutions are introduced, particularly in election years and in the years surrounding them, to serve as campaign fodder and to feed the worst parts of what's happening in politics in the United States today. And from the beginning, I have said that I will not sign on to any resolutions, and I will not move any bills that are introduced only to serve as publicity for candidates or to be used as mailer info to be used against candidates. And I echo the concerns of Senator Lathrop that he mentioned earlier when it comes to knowing that, 90% of what we see in the media today surrounding politics is inflammatory and usually false. And again, I think that as elected officials, it's part of our job to make sure that we're not feeding into the conspiracy theories that surround government in the United States. So I also wanted to mention to Senator Flood, he stood up on the mic a few minutes ago and was talking about colleagues making fun of colleagues who disagree with them and using language that is incendiary, and I appreciate that sentiment and I wholeheartedly agree. I think we can respectfully disagree with each other, particularly when it's on the record and on the mic and when the public is listening and our constituents at home are listening. And all I have to say is that I hope that he keeps that same energy when members of this body stand up on the mic and say vulgar and offensive and grotesque things about other people in this body, as they have done recently, particularly about some of the women in this body. And I hope that he, the next time that happens, stands up and stands up for the rest of us too. So how much time do I have left?
2 minutes 12.
Okay, I will yield the rest of my time to Senator Megan Hunt.
Senator Hunt, 2 minutes 6.
Thanks, Senator Jende. Those were great remarks. I think that Senator Lowe just had his Yertle the Turtle moment reading a children's book on the record during extended debate. The sky is falling, being the message of Henny Penny. And my point in this is so outside the realm of anything Nebraskans are asking us to talk about. Hospitals being at capacity, teachers having to take time off and these kids have nobody to teach them. You know, hospital beds are low, not because we literally are low on hospital beds, but because we're low on staff and we don't have people to take care of them. That's how the sky is falling. For some people, the sky really is falling. And there's nothing in LR 14 and there's nothing that we're doing here this morning that's going to help any of them.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. The sky is falling for people who need assistance with their rent, who need assistance staying in their homes, and all of the taxpayers here in Nebraska who give their money to the federal government, and then our conservative governor turns around and says no thank you to that money that we've already paid into. That is not conservative behavior. And that's how the sky is really falling. And it's also worth reaffirming that the reason federal spending is out of control, which LR 14 purportedly seeks to solve, is because of military spending and tax cuts for the rich and corporations and all the things that the people pushing for this resolution support. So miss me with the sky is falling. The sky is not falling if we can't play our founding fathers game and do a convention of states. The sky is really falling for people who are probably watching this appalled at how we're wasting our time talking about this type of thing instead of the things that are assistance and services that they need to help them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Hunt and Senator Day. Mr. Clerk, do you have a motion on your desk?
I do have a motion, Mr. President.
Colleagues, we're on final reading. If you please return to your desk and check in before we turn to the motion.
All right, Carol. Well, Carol, how did you open the vote? I'm going to close it. Hang on. And then you put your thing up there. We had a malfunction, so I'm going to need them to check as soon as she puts the motion. Hang on. Okay, now ask them to check in. We had a malfunction.
Colleagues, we had a technical issue. Would you please recheck in? Senator Wallace, please check in. Senator Blood, Senator Groney, please check in. Senator Hughes, please return to the chamber. We're on final reading. All unexcused members are now present. Mr. Clerk, for the motion.
Mr. President, Senator Holler would move to invoke cloture pursuant to Rule 7, Section 10.
It is the ruling of the chair that there has been full and fair debate afforded to LR 14. Senator Holleran, for what purpose do you rise?
Could we still have a call of the House? I see Senator Stinner is not here.
Senator Holleran, we're on final reading, so all unexcused senators, you're entitled to wait for all unexcused senators to be present, which they are. Would you like a roll call vote, Senator Holleran? A roll call vote in reverse order has been requested. The question before the body is the motion to invoke cloture. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Wishart, voting no. Senator Williams, voting yes. Senator Wayne, voting yes. Senator Walls, not voting. Senator Vargas, voting no. Senator Stinner, Senator Slama, voting yes. Senator Sanders, voting yes. Senator Pansy Brooks, voting no. Senator Pauls, voting yes. Senator Merman, voting yes. Senator Moser, voting yes. Senator Moorfeld, voting no. Senator McKinney, voting no. Senator McDonald, voting yes. Senator McAllister, voting no. Senator Lowe, voting yes. Senator Linehan, voting yes. Senator Lindstrom, voting yes. Senator Lathrop, voting no. Senator Coulterman, voting yes. Senator Hunt, voting no. Senator Hughes, voting yes. Senator Hickelman, voting yes. Senator Hilgers, voting yes. Senator Matt Hansen, Senator Ben Hansen, voting yes. Senator Holleran, voting yes. Senator Groney, voting yes. Senator Gregert, voting yes. Senator Geist, voting yes. Senator Friesen, voting yes. Senator Flood, voting yes. Senator Erdman, voting yes. Senator Dorn, voting yes. Senator DeBoer, voting yes. Senator Day, not voting. Senator Clements, voting yes. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, voting no. Senator John Kavanaugh, voting no. Senator Breesy, voting yes. Senator Brewer, voting yes. Senator Brandt, voting yes. Senator Bostelman, voting yes. Senator Bostar, voting yes. Senator Blood, not voting. Sir Arch, voting yes. Sir Albright, voting yes. Sir Aguilar, not voting. 33 ayes, 10 nays to invoke cloture, Mr. President.
The motion to invoke cloture is adopted. The next vote.
It's the McAllister motion.
Next vote is on the McAllister motion. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay.
No, I got it.
Have all those voted who wish to? Please record, Mr. Clerk.
8 ayes, 36 nays, Mr. President, on the adoption of the motion to return for specific amendment.
The motion fails. Mr. Clerk, please read the bill.
Mr. President, LR 14, introduced by Senators Holleran, Bostelman, Brewer, Breesy, Clements, Erdman, Friesen, Gregert, Ben Hansen, Coulterman, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McDonald, Merman, Slama, Williams, Hickelman, Flood. Now therefore be it resolved by the members of the 107th Legislature, first, second session, the Legislature of the State of Nebraska hereby applies to Congress on the provisions of Article 5 of the Constitution of the United States for the calling of a convention of the states limited to proposing amendments to the Constitution of the United States that imposes fiscal restrictions on the federal government, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and limit the terms of office of officials and members of Congress. The clerk of the legislature submits count to the applicant, clerk of the United States House of Representatives, members of the Senate, and House of each representative in the state, and the presiding office of each of the legislative houses in several states representing the cooperation. This application constitutes a continuing application in accordance with Article 5 of the Constitution of the United States until the legislature has released two-thirds of the several states have made applications on the same subjects. This application will be rescinded as of February 1, 2027.
All provisions of law relative to procedure having been complied with, the question is, shall LR 14 pass? All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have all those voted who wish to? Please record, Mr. Clerk.
Voting aye. Sirs Arch, Bostar, Bostman, Brand, Brewer, Breesy, Clements, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Flood, Friesen, Geis, Grager, Garoni, Holleran, Ben Hansen, Hilgers, Hickelman, Hughes, Coulterman, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McDonald, Moser, Merman, Pauls, Sanders, Slama, Wayne, Williams. Voting no, Sirs Albright, John Kavanaugh, Michaela Kavanaugh, Hunt, Lathrop, McCollister, McKinney, Moorfield, Pansy, Brooks, Vargas, Wishart. Not voting, Sirs Aguilar, Blood, Day, Walls, Matt Hansen, and Stinner. 32 A's, 11 nays, 4 present not voting, 2 excused not voting, Mr. President.
LR 14 passes. While the legislature is in session and capable of transacting business, I propose to sign and do hereby sign LR 14. Items for the record, Mr. Clerk.
I do, Mr. President, thank you. Hearing notices from the Appropriations Committee and from the Transportation and Telecommunications Committees, signed by the respective chairpersons. Also have a reference report referring gubernatorial appointment for confirmation hearing. Your Committee on Revenue reports LB 986 to general file with committee amendments attached.
Well, we have just passed in Nebraska. Nebraska has officially become the 17th state to pass a COS resolution. This is a huge victory for Convention of States. It's been a huge week, and this is just an amazing end to a huge week. Again, Nebraska has become the 17th state to pass the COS resolution. If you're just joining us now, we have received victory in Nebraska. And if you got to watch that entire debate, it started off with Senator McCollister. He submitted an unfriendly amendment to our resolution, which kicked off the filibuster with several other senators spoke. That amendment did not pass. Our legislative champion, Senator Holleran and McCollister, they had a back and forth debate. It was cordial, but Senator Holleran, he showed his intellectual muscle. He showed his support for Convention of States and for Article 5. And it was an amazing debate to see between Senator Holleran and Senator McCollister. Senator Blood, who was a Democrat, reiterated her support for and defended the framers against charges that the 1787 convention somehow ran away. Again, that was Senator Flood, who defended the 1787 convention. After 2 hours of debate, the poison amendment was defeated. The final vote on our resolution was overwhelming, 32-11. So we are going to now bring on Dave Schneider, who is the regional director. He's going to give us an on-the-ground perspective. We're going to be having him join us in just a few moments. He's going to be recapping what happened on the debate. He's going to be giving us some words on what the Nebraska team, how excited they are, and what's been going on with the Nebraska team, how we got to this victory. He'll be joining us soon. And again, if you're just tuning in, Nebraska is the 17th state to now pass the COS resolution that comes alongside Wisconsin, which became the 16th state this week. So we've had 2 states pass the COS resolution this week. What an amazing accomplishment for the grassroots on the ground in Nebraska. The challenges that they had to overcome is amazing. And it's just it just shows you the hard work and determination of our volunteers who deeply love our republic, who want to save our country, and who want to use the Constitution to save the Constitution. Again, momentarily, Regional Director Dave Schneider will be joining us. He'll be talking about how we were able to pass the COS resolution in Nebraska, effectively becoming the 17th state to pass. We're going to be getting recap on the opponents that were there speaking, the proponents. We have Regional Director Dave Schneider with us. Dave, how are you doing? How are you feeling right now that Nebraska is the 17th state to pass? This must be an amazing feeling. Please tell the audience.
I'm going to tell you right now, I got a huge sigh of relief. What you saw on the floor there was very nerve-wracking on my part. The leftists, the liberals did everything they could to stop us today. They even filibustered. They took us and forced a cloture vote, which we had to do in the first 2 rounds. So this was the toughest hurdle of all 3. But they forced us to show our cards, and we even were minus 1 guy. He was actually out today, wasn't in his chair. And we got exactly 33 votes, and exactly what we needed to get over the cloture. We've got the team all gathering around for pictures. They're all excited right now. So I'm walking down the hall here as I'm talking to you. So, oh my gosh, everybody's elated here in Lincoln, Nebraska. We've packed the rotunda again, and just an exciting experience to be a part of another state passage. So.
Absolutely. It's so amazing. And you had a victory in South Dakota this week as well. Now you have a victory in Nebraska. You must be just on cloud 9, and your teams must be just on cloud 9 right now. Do you expect that you'll get back-to-back victories? You're there with the grassroots. Look at that. Look at those beautiful grassroots. Oh, man.
That's right.
So I guess I'll ask you, since I don't have a lot of time with you, who do you credit this victory to?
It's these guys right here. It's these grassroots folks. Steve Jessen, Steve Steinkühler, Ernie Sears, and the rest of the crew here in the state of I got to remember where I'm at. I was just in South Dakota yesterday. Here I am in Nebraska. This guy's here in Nebraska, showing up and making all the phone calls, being here at the Capitol, doing the town halls back at their home districts. And you heard the testimony today, how much impact that they made with these senators. Just a testament to the fortitude. I've been working in this state for 7 years. I've had volunteers been in and out of this particular building all those years, and they are all here today. All that hard work over the years is all built to this moment. It's just amazing to be a part of.
Oh, that's just outstanding. And again, the grassroots, you just can't give them enough credit because they are an amazing team. And I just want to ask you a couple of more questions if I can. One thing I want to touch on is just the resilience of the grassroots in Nebraska, because you and the team have just jumped over so many hurdles. A newspaper last year called the Convention of States resolution in Nebraska dead, and now look at us, we've become the 17th state. So can you just quickly recap how we went from dead in the water from that newspaper article to now being 17th state to pass the COS resolution?
Again, it's all because of our grassroots. You heard a story from Senator Flood during the debate where 300 plus of his constituents showed up waiting for him to explain why he didn't vote for our procedural move to get us out of committee last year. And he had to explain at that minute, he had to hatch some sort of a plan with the grassroots. And we saw steps 1, 2, and 3 at the end of last session that he hatched at that very minute because of all those concerned citizens that talked to him about that vote. Now, we were dead. We were absolutely killed here in the state of Nebraska until that plan went through fruition. We revised the bill, or revived the bill from the ash heap. We got it back into committee, and you heard some of the mashing of teeth today from the leftists about that whole process. They call it vote trading or whatever, and we held their feet to the fire as far as getting that thing back out of committee. That's all the grassroots, and Senator Halloran was a huge part of that, as well as Senator Flood, to ensure that this step-by-step process that we put in place at the beginning of last year, we've been dead in that committee for the last 3 years. And just the sheer force of the grassroots willed their way to revive this effort here in the state of Nebraska. This is one of the biggest miracles I've ever been a part of. I'm just going to tell you that right now. This is a God thing. It is bigger than any one person. If we wouldn't have died, we wouldn't have passed. It's just that simple. We'd still be stuck in committee if we wouldn't have attempted some of those things that we did last year. It's just we had to go through that adversity to actually get the win here in the state of Nebraska. It's what focused the grassroots and where it needed to focus. It's just an amazing set of circumstances.
An amazing miracle indeed. You, the team, Senator Halloran, Senator Flood, you all pulled a rabbit out of your hat on this one. And the country is better because of it, because now, again, Nebraska, the 17th state. I want to ask you one more question before I let you go, because I know you want to go spend some time with the grassroots. You got a victory in South Dakota, but you only got in one chamber. Do you think that you're moving to back-to-back wins in your region going to South Dakota?
Well, I already had back-to-back wins in my region. The fact that we got out of committee was further than we got last year in the state of South Dakota. And then the fact that we made it out of one of the chambers in South Dakota, we haven't been that far. So here we are. We've cleared one of the biggest hurdles in the entire country. The South Dakota legislature is one of the toughest legislatures. We fought going to battle every single year in there. We've cleared the House with a clear message going into the Senate. And I'm going to tell you, it's not going to be easy going through that Senate. We're really deadlocked right now, 15-15, with maybe 5 or so in the middle. We've got to turn at least 3 of those 5 in our favor to have a chance. But we're going into a committee that essentially looks like it's a kill committee for us. So we're going to have to really go in with a lot of pressure. We might remember a couple years ago when we had to do a smoke out there in the state of South Dakota, at least attempt one. It wasn't as successful. We got to be ready for next week. We're asking for everybody to get to Pierre next Friday. We're going to have committee. You're hearing it here first. Next Friday, we're going to be in committee. We're going to come with forces, and we're going to demand that South Dakota gets on board with Convention of States. So we're really close. It's going to take another sheer will of our grassroots and showing up in mass there. If you're in the Pierre area, I know it's a hard place to get in this time of year. But we're going to have Nebraskans even showing up there, I think, after this. They're excited. I know my group in Norfolk, Nebraska is a lot closer than I am to Pierre, and I think they're even talking about trying to get up there for that big rally that we're planning.
Mm-hmm. And Dave, I know that the prayers are with you and the team in South Dakota. The prayers with you in all of your states and in your region. I know Dr. Coburn, he's smiling right now over you, and he's watching over you and the team. I got one last question for you before we let you go. What is your message to supporters, volunteers who are tuning in right now, who are going to watch this? They're not in Nebraska and they want to make a difference. What is your advice to them? How can they get involved? What can they do to help restore the Republic?
Well, the quintessential thing is to get involved with Convention State. Certainly sign the petition, sign up to volunteer, and then get active. Don't just stop there. Just because you sign up doesn't stop there. And don't let that limit you either. Get involved, learn how the process works in your particular state. Every state's a little different. Believe me, every state is different in how it moves, but you can't learn it, you can't understand it, and you can't be a part of change until you become a part of Convention States and working through this process. Our groups across the entire country are doing this in every state house, in every county, every community, every state district. So get involved and stay active. This is paying off today for these folks. A lot of these folks, the first time they've ever been to the Capitol today. I'm going to go be with them now. Appreciate you guys.
That's a strong message. You can't be for change if you're not involved. I love it. Congratulations, Dave. Congratulations to you and the team. You've done amazing work. We're all with you and just so excited for this huge victory in Nebraska. Go spend some time with the grassroots. We love you, man. We'll see you soon. Congratulations again.
All right, we'll see y'all.
All right, we just talked with Dave Schneider. If you just happened to tune in, he gave us a recap and told us about the amazing grassroots that we have on the ground in Nebraska, because Nebraska has become the 17th state to pass the COS resolution. Again, Nebraska is number 17 to join the Convention of States movement to limit the size, scope, and jurisdiction of the federal government. We are one state closer to calling the very first Article 5 Convention of States. It's an amazing day for Convention of States. It's been an amazing week. We saw a victory in South Dakota where the resolution was passed in one chamber. We saw Wisconsin become the 16th state, and now we have Nebraska, the 17th state. So it has been an amazing week for Convention of States. I hope you all had time to watch the debate and see Nebraska become the 17th state. It was absolutely amazing. So exciting. Thank you for tuning in. We're going to sign off now. If you're not involved with the Convention of States yet, please get involved. This movement is driven by we the people. We need you on the front lines, growing the grassroots within your district, touching your legislators and letting them know that you support Convention of States and that you want them to support Convention of States. We can only get this done if we have grassroots volunteers who are willing to fight for liberty, who are willing to restore the republic. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Constitutional scholars think the nation has entered an age of post-constitutional soft tyranny.
Grassroots campaign is aiming to take on the federal government.
They're hoping that a little-known fact about the U.S. Constitution can help their cause.
One Nebraska senator has introduced legislation calling for what is called an Article 5 convention.
Senator Steve Halloran wants to issue a resolution adding Nebraska's name to a list of states trying to organize a convention of the states to propose constitutional amendments.
Authority for this is found in Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution.
Article 5 is one of the tools that we have in our toolbox as citizens and as states to help control and limit the power of the federal government.
I think it's abundantly clear that Congress is broken.
We believe that government is most effective when it's closest to the people.
Nebraskans can affect change in our nation's government, and one group is showing you how.
We believe that Congress is not going to change itself. We think we as citizens working through our legislators can make the changes we need.
That I walked into the Norfolk Public Library and there were 350 people in the room that cared about this.
The people of Nebraska want solutions to the problems they see.
And we need you, our leaders, to stand up and help us.
Legislators, we can send a message to the federal government that we've had enough.
We're tired of their games.
The only way to recover some of the powers taken over by the federal government is for the states to hold an Article 5 Convention of the States.
The last best hope we have to save our republic.
Consider amendments which would 1. Impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, 2. Limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and 3. Limit the terms of office for its officials and for members of Congress.
Amendments that can restore the intended balance of power between the states and the federal government.
Calling for an Article 5 Convention of States is allowing the people in those states to have a voice on proposing amendments to the Constitution.
To empower citizens and promote self-governance, a convention of states bids all states to come together and is a strong show of unity across all party lines, something our nation desperately needs this very moment.
You have the chance to be a part of our country's story that will be told to future generations.
This will be the biggest thing that's happened in the last century.
This is the way that government should work, at the state and local levels, where the citizens can access their legislators.
I am part of the Nebraska voters who support the Convention of States.
I support the Convention of States initiative.
I'm here on behalf of my great-grandchildren.
I left work, drove an hour and a half to get here because it's that important to me.
This is all about grassroots. This is all about we the people.
We're ready to do the tough things needed.
You're going to have to get up and show up, speak up, and do some work.
America has been the land of the free and the home of the brave. Will we be brave now to do what we can to guard the freedom for the future?
I implore you to take this to the next level and save this country from what I feel to be sure destruction.